Okay, today we're going to put on a seminar on poison hands. Now, I'm Bruce Miller, and I'm from a style called Quan. Now, poison hands was basically a series of techniques were grouped together under the style name of poison hands, and they came basically from the Chinese side of the house. And I'm going to go through everything from the history to all those different techniques which were lumped together under poison hands. Now, I know there's a lot of confusion out there exactly what poison hands is, and some of that is based on the fact that there's been a lot of rumor, a lot of superstition on that. And a lot of people even thought that poison hands died out. Obviously that's not true, or I wouldn't be able to put this seminar on today, and you'll see why. The history of poison hands is actually quite interesting in the fact that it's probably several centuries old. I'm not going to get into exact dates and exact lineage because, as with a lot of things in history, there's a lot of questionable statements made by people who originally developed this thing in the lineage, and a lot of claims on who it was associated with. And quite frankly, I don't care. It's not really relevant to the street who developed something or who, was the founder. It was definitely developed in the Chinese styles, and I think that much credit has to be given. Beyond that, really not that relevant. Some of the things that you got to know, though, to understand how it was made up, is that originally poison hands was developed basically in the religious orders. And it was developed as a departure from the standard way of doing things, where basically you just naturally reached out and killed your opponent, and you did as messy of a job as possible so they'd leave you alone. Well, in the ancient Chinese, some of the monasteries began to regard life as a sanctimony or a significant event in itself, and the concept was not to unnecessarily damage or kill somebody if you didn't have to. Yes, you had to stop them, and even the priests and stuff in those days had to defend themselves from marauding crooks and thieves and warlords of the earth. And if they couldn't defend themselves, they were very soon taken victim of and killed. But rather than learning how to just to fight with the standard techniques, some of the monasteries learned techniques which basically could stop their opponents, not just in blocks, but actually cause them significant pain, significant damage that would impair their functioning for a good point of time, possibly even paralyze them, possibly even kill them. But it was all in a graduated way, so they could actually take and determine how much response they had to give, rather than just reaching out and killing somebody, which was a departure. Or it's just like, which is the most effective way of killing your opponent? Well, when you're trying to preserve life, you don't always want to kill, and that's what they were after. And in fact, there was 5 different techniques that were put together. Now, the first 3 very clearly are a graduated response. The level 4 and level 5, which I'm going to get into, which I'm actually going to get into more than I ever did in my book, is actually attacks that, personally, I have a little bit of trouble believing they were actually originated in the religious connotations, because they're so deadly and they cause so much damage to the opponent that I really have trouble believing that the religious people with that sort of orientation would have developed them. But they are part of the style that I was taught. Okay? Typical Chinese philosophy meant that poison hands was actually a restricted concept, restricted style, and it really wasn't taught to people outside of the Chinese influence, as far as I know, until, well, I'd have to say the early 70s, when I and a few other people were taught the poison hands techniques. And we were taught that of a style called Quan. Now, even that's not really relevant, except for the fact that I was taught under the old style, the Qi concepts. And it was later that I brought what the actual techniques were and changed them over to the Western medicine. Now, the explanations I'm going to give you are all based on Western medicine, physics, and mathematics, so you'll be able to understand what's happening. You don't have to know anything about Qi. In fact, Qi won't help you understand things. Qi will actually not give you the answers, some of the answers, because they're just not as complete as Western medicine. So everything I'm going to have here will be based on Western medicine, although I'm using the same exact technique as it was historically correct. Okay? I need to say a little bit about confusion, about the confusion of poison hands. Because of the fact it was restricted style, and because people had heard the name, there was a lot of confusion about what poison hands really was. And there's even been some really interesting / humorous articles in some of the magazines. In fact, I read one article one time in a prominent martial arts magazine that said that poison hands was a technique where people learned to develop their resistance by dipping their hand in poison. And they developed this resistance, and then they could paint poison on their hand and reach out and touch somebody, and that would then poison their victim. Well, obviously, it has nothing to do with that. First off, it's a totally unworkable plan. It wouldn't work against somebody who's wearing any clothes. If you developed a poison that was that deadly, there's no way you'd develop resistance against. So it's a total nonsense concept. Poison hands really has nothing to do with poison. You're not poisoning anything at all. But because of the superstition and lack of understanding of the people when it was first developed, because they were produced effects that had a gradual increase over time, they thought, and it acted like something was being injected. And because these effects, you hit them now, and in 30 seconds they hurt. 3 minutes later they hurt terribly, and an hour later they were just in excruciating pain, and it felt to them like somebody injected some poison. That was the only explanation they had. And they really didn't understand back in the old days the concepts of Western medicine we have now. There was no detailed anatomical models. There was no nerve studies, and they just didn't understand what was happening. So they came up with the Chi theory, and that was good for those days. But when you actually look at medicine, you can understand this has nothing to do with energy flow. It has nothing to do with poison injections. It's pure Western medicine. Okay. As I said, poison has 5 levels. The first level is obviously the easy, and it's called soft blocks. Now, soft blocks are in a way exactly that, as you're blocking somebody soft. And that's different. And when you try and block somebody really hard, or a higher block, you're trying to put all your muscle into it. And you're basically trying to lock your muscles, your joint out, and prevent them from moving in. A soft block is just the opposite. And then basically, you're trying to keep your elbows bent and basically loose, but not so loose that you take all this, absorb all the shock, but you can graduate the shock. Now, what I mean by that, Mark, if I get you to come up here, and if you just, for demonstration, just take and throw a roundhouse kick right about right there. Now, you can do a classical technique of trying to block like that, and that would be a standard block. Or you can do what a lot of people do, which is the palm heel block. Now, palm heel block, a lot of people do, they block just naturally. They're in the center of their palm. And it can actually deliver a lot of force. If you do the kick and you lock your arm there, you can feel the shock go all the way up into your own body. In fact, you can cause a lot of damage to your own shoulder and your neck. So you don't want to do that. You can actually come out and you can block the palm of your hand and do a pretty good block. You can do a lot of damage. I should say that, let me correct, you do a lot of pain that way, just blocking the palm of your hand. Kind of a stiff arm block. But like I said, you're going to do more damage to yourself. You can actually do a better job if you bend your knees, okay? And just kind of bend your knees, bend your arm and your elbow, and just kind of take and absorb the shock. Now, the reason why that's better, of course, is you're doing less damage to you. You're doing the same amount of damage to them, but because you're loose, not only up here, but down here, your whole body's going to absorb the shock, so you won't be doing any damage to you. All right? So now we've done the same amount of damage to them, i.e. your opponent, without doing the damage to you. But yet there's a better way to even increase the damage to your opponent, so that you can actually take all the force that he's delivering and delivering it into a small area and cause damage. All right? What I mean by that, if you take a surface area, take 100 pounds and put it into an area that's an inch by an inch, you have 100 pounds per square inch. Force equals pressure equals force divided by surface area. That's the standard physics formula. If you take the same area and you divide it by ½ inch, obviously the force goes a lot higher. Cut the area in half and your force goes up. Okay? Cut the area in fourth, you got 4 times as much area. It's real easy if you narrow down the area, you can see that. It's the same concept why a pin hurts. You take the point of the pin and you just touch it. That's because all the force of the pin is being concentrated on the tip of the pin. Well, the same thing can be had with the palm hand block, but you can't do it on a straight hand palm hand block. There's no way that you can really narrow this down no matter how you tip it. But luckily, they found that if you tip your hand so that you move the strike point over about a finger width. You put your finger on the center line of your palm, and you put your finger right next to it. You'll find that that spot right there, that the bones in it, and if you tip your hand so that's the contact point right there, you'll actually be able to narrow the point down. And furthermore, as you strike at that point, you notice that the line of force is angled, not through your shoulder, but back to the center of your body. And since your elbow is bent, it makes it a lot easier for you to absorb the force. So again, Mark, same kick, and you hit right there. Again, strike. If the camera can see that, just do it nice and slow motion. And you're striking right there, you're dramatically narrowing down the force. Because this area is about a half of a square inch, versus this was at least 1 to 1.5 inches here. So therefore, we've doubled the force. Actually, you can retract your hand just a little bit and cut the force down again. And with practice, you can narrow that down easily to about 1/4 of a square inch. Now, if you have 100 pounds in 1 inch, so like I said, is 100 pounds per square inch. Divided down into 4, you're talking a minimum of 400 pounds per square inch. That's a lot of force per surface area. Now, if he kicks 100 pounds is really, if he kicks 200 or 300 pounds per square inch, I can easily exceed the amount of force it takes to shatter the bone. And yet I didn't even lock my arms. So if he kicks hard, now don't really nail into it because if I hit you, and I hit that spot, I can cause his leg to shatter. Just not from my impact, because I'm really not doing anything, but from his impact. They're taking all his force and narrowing it down that spot. And in fact, you can even increase it farther. Level 1 blocks, we said so far have been passive. What happens if you start moving your hand forward? Now, you don't want to lock your hand out, but if you get your timing right and you can come forward, and you can add that force to your own body, especially if your knees are bent. Again, that's why I said bend the knees, because then you can bring your hips into play, and you can add your own force. It's real easy to do. Add another 50, 75, 100 pounds per square inch. Just boom, because remember, to get 100 pounds per square inch on 1/4 inch, all you have to do is put 25 pounds. Everybody here can push 25 pounds. It's real simple. So now you're up to 500 or 600 pounds per square inch. All right, again, try it, and just move. And he can feel it where I'm hitting the muscle, because I'm not hitting the bone. I'm coming just a little bit on the edge of the bone. We'll talk about that in a minute. So we're basically here. We've increased the force dramatically just in a level 1 block. Okay? All right. We can even be a little bit nastier if we want to. As it comes into, we cannot, before all this time, we've been doing a straight hand, just kind of lock, tightening it up there. You can even increase it more by hit and rotate. Because as you hit, you take all the force and you rotate it forward, you'll actually rotate it into a smaller point of area. Cut that 1/4 inch down again, about a half. So now you're from a 1/4 inch to about 1/8 of an inch. What was 100 pounds before is now 800 pounds per square inch. Not even counting your force. There's not too many bones in the body can take 800 pounds per square inch without shattering. So he's kicked 100 pounds. Almost everybody here, 8 years old up, can kick 100 pounds. Muscles in the legs are pretty strong. So if they kick 100 pounds and you can turn that into 800 pounds per square inch, they're in trouble, big time. Everybody understand that? All right. So the techniques, like I said, are basically keep your knees near up, elbow bend, rotate into it, narrow it down to the spot, and as you hit, then twist. All right. Now, I'm going to get into one other thing, which really helps sometimes. It's called a supported hand or a cupped hand. Okay. You've seen a lot of techniques where they do this. Now, there's a lot of meanings for classical hands. One of the Chinese hands means was the second hand really did nothing. It basically just stood there. So it was the support. So you make certain your force is in the center. It kept your hands from being out on the side and locked. It kept it. So if you do the kick, and this time inside, you see, it looks like you're crossing. But what you're really doing is by putting your hand back here, you're making certain that the force comes through your hand to the center of your body. Okay. And again, you can take and you can still rotate it. Roll your hand. But you can feel the force here, and it has no force up here. Now we're going to stop, and I want everybody to practice level 1. And I want you to learn and make certain that you don't lock it. If you can feel the force in your shoulders or your neck, you're doing it wrong. You can get yourself hurt. And I want you to just take and learn, and it's very good to practice the 2 hands. But you make contact, and you push, and you roll it, all right? But keep your knees bent, keep your elbows bent, okay? All right. as he kicks, everything nice and long, all right? I'm sorry, nice and free. Kick again. Boom. And it doesn't have to stay full contact. You're not talking about staying there the whole time. All you need to be there is just for that instant, just to stop that force, and just kind of let it catch it, deliver the force, and just let it go. You're not trying to capture it going back. You're not trying to keep it from, sliding out forward. It doesn't really matter. Just, come on. Boom. And he can feel it. And that was a light blow, because I didn't even put my weight in. If I had shifted my weight along the hand or twisted it, he'd be in trouble. And that was a real light blow. He kicked light, I tapped light, but you notice my shoulder wasn't tight, the elbow wasn't tight. I put my other hand here just as a reminder, because this is where I want the force to come. And this is also the strongest line, so you have more chance to feather things. Let him drive it back this way, as you're just putting resistance. It just gets farther, and just roll it. Boom. Now the real Chinese, we'll bring it at let it go in and push it back out. They won't overextend, but they'll just catch it and just drive it right back out, almost instantaneously. And it just takes that force and just drives it right in there, and just explodes it. It's really a color. He can feel that even now. One of the biggest problems people have in doing soft lock is they think they need to be doing something dramatic. They think they have to be tight. They think they have to deliver all this force. The trick is to stay loose. Let it happen. Let them come to you. You're not doing an attack that you're making them come to you. If they don't initiate the attack, nothing happens. If they don't kick hard, nothing happens. You're basically just being there in a nice horse rider stand, just down, knees are bent, elbows are bent, shoulders are loose, waist is loose, and just boom. Don't worry about getting to them. Let them come to you, and just after they make contact, then you kind of push forward. Don't reach for them. If you reach for them, you're negating all your effect. Sit back, pass. The Chinese are masters at redirection, and they make you come to them. And this is designed along those lines. You make them come to you, not out here, but here. And after yes, you can reach up, but don't reach past and lock your hips up. Just stay loose. Make them come to you. Just do it. Just be. Don't be so active. Just relax. Sit down. Be there. Be solid. Be patient, and wait till them come, and they'll hurt.
This twisting motion is kind of up like this, right?
It's into it. Just try. Don't worry about going up. Don't worry about going. Just go into the bone. Let the flow go into the bone. Okay? Get that down. I want you everyone to master that. That was level 1. And I really think people need to do some practice to learn how to stay relaxed. Too many people want to reach for things, and we've talked about this. But for the people on the tape, learn just to sit there. Don't block out here. Block here. This is real strong coming this way. You're not going to get hit, because this is the strongest line in your body straight on there. You're going to do good. Okay, level 2. Muscle attacks. Now, muscle attacks are not like muscle attacks in other systems. We just try and beat on the muscle and destroy it. Muscle attacks and poison hands are very specific. And I was taught that what you were doing was you're robbing the energy by hitting specific chi points. Well, the fact of the matter is that that's really not a good answer, because most of the points that I was taught did not correspond to acupuncture points. And they were, they're just special conditions, special cases. Well, that's not true at all. The real truth of the matter is that every muscle in the body is connected to an apparatus called the Golgi tendon apparatus. And the purpose of the Golgi tendon apparatus is to prevent the muscle from contracting so hard that it rips itself off the tendons and bone. All right? A muscle is connected to bone on one end or another tendon and a tendon on the other side, so it can cause contraction. And if it contracts too hard or too fast, it'll just rip itself right apart. But he has the ability to pull their muscles or pull them right off, rip them right off the bones. Okay? The Golgi tendon apparatus is actually this little device which measures how fast and how strong a muscle contracts. Now, if you contract really slow, the Golgi tendon apparatus doesn't have an effect. If you try and move fast or constrict, it slows it down so you can't overextend and over damage your muscle. Well, in actuality, what we're going to do in a level 2 attack is to stimulate the Golgi tendon apparatus. And we're going to stimulate it in such a way that we cause swelling in that area. And when you cause swelling by the GTA, it gets hypersensitive, and it feels exactly like your muscle does after you've had a Charlie horse. Now, almost everybody's had a really bad Charlie horse, like in their leg, and they can hardly walk on it. It's not that the muscle doesn't work. It's just you really can't get the muscle to do what it's supposed to. It just does not want to contract and support your leg. or your arm, or wherever you had it. And that's exactly what a poison hand strike to a Golgi tendon apparatus does. Well, like we said, every muscle in the body has a GTA, or at least every group of muscles. And they're spread out amongst the body, and a lot of them are really hard to get to. Just like with pressure points, and a lot of the rules apply here that did way back to pressure points. And if you have any questions about that, you need to go back and see the book or video. But one of the main rules about stimulated GTA is you have to be able to do it where it's not going to slide away. Meaning you can't do a strike against a bunch of muscles that are layered so deep that it's just going to absorb the force. You have to do it where the muscles are against something hard underneath. And a good position for that is what we call a rule of quarters. Now, as we say, every muscle has a GTA in it, and they're generally located just about the tendon-muscle junction, which means that they're about a quarter of the way up on the start of the muscle. Now, the best way to find it is if you take it like a muscle. Mark, come on up. You got a pretty good area. If you roll up your arm here, can we do that? I don't know if we can get that up. All right. But if you take the muscle, you take it from here to here, and you divide it in half, and then divide it again in half, you're going to find that this is the area right here where the GTA are at, Golgi tendon apparatus. Now, since this, in this case, this is a fan-shaped muscle, there's actually going to be a whole line. You measured it out over here, it's a little shorter, and it's a little shorter over here, and a little longer in the middle. So you're going to have kind of a line, kind of an arc of spots that you can hit. And these spots, if you hit them, are actually going to cause the Golgi tendon apparatus and the tissues around it to swell. Now, something you need to know. When you hit them, immediately the swelling doesn't really happen. It hurts, and it hurts for a second. And that would be kind of like a pressure point strike, whereas you hit, the pain's there. You take it out. But when you do a GTA strike or a pressure point strike, the pain will start increasing afterwards. Meaning, when you hit a pressure point and you let off on it, the pain goes away. You hit a poison hit, the pain will increase with time. So if I haul up, and he's in a fight, and I reach out and I catch him in a poison point, like we said, and then I sit back here for a second, give him 30 seconds, and he's going to have real trouble raising that arm, because that arm is not going to want to work. Hit him one in the leg, and give him 30 seconds, or even 10 seconds, and he's going to start hurting. Give him another 20 seconds, and he's not going to put any weight on the leg. If he can't put any weight on the leg, I've got a pretty good sparring advantage. And it really doesn't take very long, a matter of actually seconds, before they start noticing something's wrong. Something is wrong enough that it upsets their balance. So you real quickly can you develop an advantage. Since it causes pain initially on straight, you've got the advantage that way, but it's not as much of an advantage as you would in a pressure point. But it really becomes accumulative within seconds, within minutes, within hours. And these effects can last, on a muscle can last 3-4 days. In fact, you hit somebody strong on a pressure point, or I'm sorry, a level 2 poison hand strike, and they will be cursing your name for several days. It's a good educator. Okay? The rule of quarters is important, though. If you find any muscle in the body which is overlaying bone, all right, which is a really good place, why it's really strong, you can take and you can tap that Golgi tendon apparatus and basically cause that whole group of muscles to quit moving. Because they'll move, but they really hurt, and they just don't want to work right. And the best places I found are the ones in the deltoid, the pectoralis, and what the muscle called the sartorius. Now the sartorius, and we've talked about this in some of my other sparring, is a muscle starts here, goes all the way down here, which means it'll have a Golgi tendon apparatus like it does in most long muscles at both points, over here, because you divide it in half, divide it in half again, it's about right there. But there's also one from here, here's half, there's another one right there, and if you reach on, you can find it. It's right about right there. Okay, for the camera, we divide it in half, about right there, divide it in half again, and this is the rule of quarters. Now, it also explains why a lot of Chinese people fight straight on. Because they know that if you're fighting like this and you tip your foot, you just open up that poison point. Mark, come on out here. Now, if we're sitting here sparring, and he tips that foot down, all I have to do is tap that point, step back here, and wait about 3 seconds. And he's going to have real trouble with putting weight on that foot. If he's dumb enough to switch around the other leg, and I do the same thing over here, Now all of a sudden he can't kick me. He can't lift either leg up to kick me. He's got his hands, and I'm going to sit back and I'm going to pick him apart. Break his knees, whatever nasty little thing I like to do. But now I've got him disabled. One kick. And it's so nice because you can reach in and approach this. Okay? The nice thing also is that you can also block. We can do soft blocks with the leg, try and narrow it down, but it really doesn't work so well with the leg because it's really hard to tone things down. The leg. In fact, if you try and tip it too much, the force can actually dislocate or shatter your ankle. So that's not a smart thing to do. But if he comes up with a low kick, I can take and I can block the muscle. And I can block it in the GPA point, which is just one right there. Boom. Or on the inside, there's another one. Boom. I'm sorry, right there. And he can feel it because I caught him at the upper muscle right there, the quarter of the gastric. And it can actually cause him so he can't step down that leg. If he can't step down, I know which leg he has to move and which one he can't get off the ground. He can't put enough weight on it to support him. He's got another advantage. Okay? So we're going to practice this for a second. But you got to know that the only ones that work are the ones that have a hard surface underneath them. Okay? Now, one other thing I want to talk about before I release you practice is that there's a difference between pressure points and poison hands. Pressure point strike work best when there's a lot of tension on it. When you try and unlock a knee, the best thing they can do is have tension on it. Poison hands are just the opposite. You want to have not such a hard surface. You want to be able to relax a little bit so it can actually penetrate in. Okay? So if he's really tight and you hit him, you're not going to get a poison hand strike because the goals you tendon after are kind of deep underneath the muscle, on the underside of the tendon. But if he relaxes his muscle, and most good fighters will relax, they're not tight all the time. But if they relax, then you reach in and tap that point, you've got a poison hand strike. Okay? So we're going to get up and try that and make sure everybody understands that. The question is, which ones you should concentrate on most? The one I concentrate on the most is the one on the upper sartorius. That's the number one point because it's the one that's most useful when you're trying to approach. The other one that I really concentrate on is the one on the deltoid. There's a whole line through there. And the third one is the pectoralis one. Okay? Especially the pectoralis minor and major. And you find those points the same way. Divide it in half, again, and you just try tap it. Because, Dan, come here a second. If somebody's punching at you, let's punch the camera this way, all right? Punch the other hand. No. Hit here, and you reach out and you tap the point right there. They're not going to be able to move that arm. Bam! 1, 2. And you now have yourself a person who does not want to move, and you can feel that. You don't want to move that arm very much. And I hit the pectoralis minor. One finger. Boom. Now, if that was a pressure point, it'd be all over with. Because that's a poison hand point, he can feel it. And it's going to get, if I tapped him really hard, he'd be really hurting within a half an hour. Okay, thank you. And Troy's got, everybody look up here. Troy's got really good deltoids here. You can see, here's the muscle. All right? You divide it in half from the top to the bottom. Just divide it in half and divide it in half again. You'll see, like we said, it curves around. So therefore, you got this arc right through it. And you should tap. Now, one thing I should say about the strike. When I tap Dan, I use one finger. What you want to do is a strike that penetrates. So you don't want to use the whole fist. The Chinese use a strike classically called the eye of the phoenix, which is just your first finger put out. I'll say you can you can either use the eye of the phoenix or you can use the standard knuckle strike. I don't care whichever you prefer. Which is basically, just reach out and you tap that point, and just boom. All right, and you can feel it when I tap. If I hold off and hit it, because there's good bone underneath, he's going to have an arm that he does not want to raise. If he doesn't want to raise it, well, again, you've got the advantage. That's the whole point. Boom. And it's really, someone's got their hand in, boom, you got it. It's a great trick against boxers. All of a sudden, the boxer can't raise his hand, and it's like, now what do I do? All I can do is punch, but I can't get my hands up. All right, I've been asked the question, how do you know where all these points are? Because obviously there's a lot more than I showed. It's a very good question. And yes, I could sit back and show you 1,000 points, but you'd be straight memorization. What you really need to do is to get a hold of an anatomy book. Look where the top layer of muscles are. Look where there's a solid surface underneath, and start tracing these muscles up. Any book like Gray's Anatomy or any Grant will show you where all the muscles are. You find some muscles that you like in every part of the body, the leg, thigh, abdomen, ribs. Find the muscles that you like. Just trace them out in your own body. You'll get to see, you can look and recognize muscles through somebody's uniform, really easy. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to have somebody, walking down the street going to attack you in shorts that you can see all the muscles. It doesn't happen that way. You need to do the work, the legwork of learning the anatomy, at least superficially, so that you can tell where the muscles are. Just watching, I can tell you exactly where the poison points are in him. Okay? Also the pressure points and all that. But that's because I've studied enough anatomy. And if you really want to be good in martial arts, you do need to study that anatomy. It just comes down to pure work. And I can't make that easier for you. I can give you the principles, but I can't take that part of the work away. Okay. Level 3 attacks are nerve attacks. Now, they're really not much different than the nerve attacks I told you about pressure points. And again, I've got to say the warning here. A couple of things apply. One of which is there are some people that do not feel the pain. They are non-responders. We're talking 10 to 15% of the population that you could hit, and they will not feel the pain of these attacks. That does not, however, mean that you won't be doing them damage. You can paralyze somebody's arm or leg with these attacks, and they won't feel the pain, but their leg just won't work. Now, there's a big difference between the pressure point strikes and poison hand strikes in the fact that poison hand strikes are a lot more limited, and they only go for the large nerves. Now, when I did my pressure points lecture, I specifically told you to stay away from the large nerves because they cause a lot of damage. And I mean every part of that now. I'm telling you stuff for education. I do not want you going out tapping on somebody's large nerves. Even if you tap lightly, if you accumulate the effects, there's going to be some swelling, and you're going to have a paralyzed arm, paralyzed leg, which may not come back. Especially if they're a non-responder. You just don't do that. All right? But for demonstration purposes, I'm going to show you where these lines are. And I'm not going to be hitting, mark against you. One of the best places on the arm is the axillary nerve. Now, you can tap, and you can do an eye of the phoenix or a knuckle strike all along this line, or the axillary nerve that goes up into the armpit. Just strike. 1, 2. And every style has got techniques and handles. 1, strike. And you're going to cause pain both initially, because it is a pressure point here, but you're also going to cause the swelling. And the poison hands, people love it, because when I tap you now, not only did it hurt and stop your attack, it can also cause you to hurt for long and long. And if I had to do that hard, then you may wind up being paralyzed. And if they felt that they had to do that, they would rather paralyze an arm rather than kill somebody. And it basically went in the cascade. You did as least damage as possible, but you stopped somebody. And sometimes you had to paralyze them. Now, the nasty thing that they used to do was that somebody would kick, and they'd block, and they'd kick. Now, I didn't kick the groin. What I kicked was the femoral nerve. The femoral nerve goes down here on the inside. Again, kick, block, strike. You notice I'm kicking the back leg where the pressure is. So this is the femoral nerve. It runs down here, and I reached up and I caught it back, my back foot against theirs. And if I kick that thing and I kick it hard, you can rip it, you can cause a lot of swelling, and you can paralyze the leg. Well, of course, when they fall down, they're liable to shatter their own leg, but that's even secondary damage. The fact of the matter is you are causing a lot of permanent damage. And in our style, we train to kick the back leg, but we do not even touch that hard. We don't even, matter of fact, we don't even touch the sock. We'll get close to it, but we'll stop with it. Because if you hit that femoral nerve, which is on both sides, you're going to cause damage. And I warn you, don't do it, okay? I do want to have people find these spots. I don't want to have anybody here tapping them. Please, when you're doing it, seeing the tape, do not do this without supervision. Get somebody who knows what they're talking about, and just touch it. Do not even hit it lightly, okay? Try it. I want you to find... All right. Again, I want you, if the camera can kick in on this picture a little bit, you can see the axillary nerve come on up here, follows the artery all the way up and into the axilla, right in the armpit. Now, several people notice that it hurts when you tap it in, and they were tapping too hard. And I get real paranoid, so please be careful. You also notice that the femoral nerve comes up, and it dives a little bit deeper as it gets towards the top. So if you're going to hit the top, you have to go a little bit deeper, a little bit harder. It's a little more exposed right there about the middle before it dives down into the muscle again. Okay? We're going to go into level 4. Now, level 4 is really a nasty move. And I do not want anybody practicing. I'm going to talk about level 4 and level 5. Because if you practice level 4, you're not going to be able to undo the effects. If you have a problem with level 4, if you don't go to a chiropractor or a doctor of osteopathy, you're not going to be okay. This is going to cause permanent effects. It's going to really hurt somebody. Because what you're going to do is you're going to lock up muscles and possibly compromise both blood flow and nerve function. All right? This is why I said level 4 was a lot more in-depth, and I really kind of question was actually developed in the monastery. This is a nasty level. All right. To understand level 4, you have to understand that all the vertebrae have what they call spines in it. As you can come in on the camera, you can see these pictures. You'll see from the side that they have these spines that stick out from the vertebrae. And this is true from all of them, all the way from number 2 all the way down to the bottom of your sacral. Now, there's muscles that run through and attach to these spines. Now, these muscles are supposed to stabilize your spine and yet let you turn your head, let you turn all parts of your spine. Through those muscles run nerves and blood vessels and ligaments and other muscles, and it really gets compacted in it. Now, they're all supposed to turn and flow smoothly. And that's how you can turn your head, turn your hips. What happens is almost everybody at some point in time has had their back lock up. Now, what happens from that point is one of the tendons or ligaments has gotten cut along one of these spines or in one of the junctions between the two vertebrae. It's called facets. Sometimes there's rib facets and there's facets between those two vertebrae. What you're going to do with level 4 is actually cause a lockup. What you're going to do is take one of these muscles and you're going to roll it to get caught on the wrong side of the spine. You're just going to roll it and lock it up. And when that happens, it just kind of bends this muscle right around that spine, and it suddenly starts hurting. Well, the body's compensation for pain like it is to immediately go in spasm. When it goes in spasm, it lumps up and tightens up and pulls. That's bad, because unfortunately when that happens, it's like taking a string and snapping it tight. It no longer has enough elasticity to pop around. And it'll stay there. And when it stays there, it's causing damage and getting further and further tender and swollen. And as that happens, it increases, which puts more pressure on the other muscles and nerves and blood flow around it. So you can really cause some damage. And that's why I say, unless you have somebody who's trained to be able to get her and unlock that, you're going to have a muscle that's going to be a big-time hurt. And it can actually cause nerve damage. So it's not something that you really want to do very well. All right? But I am going to talk about it for educational purposes. And I'm going to show some of the things that you can do, but I don't want anybody, I repeat, anybody doing it. I know how to reverse it. Because that's because of level 3 shiatsu and because I'm a medical trainer. If you don't know how to do that, you got no business trying to do one of these strikes unless your life's in danger. Okay? All right. What I'm going to talk about is basically how to lock up the neck. Now, the reason why you lock up the neck is 2 reasons, actually. One is the easiest to get to, both from the fact that it's easiest to strike, and from the fact that at this point, you don't have ribs. The ribs will protect the muscles from floating around too much, and therefore it's really, really hard to lock those up. Which means that you can lock them up in what's called the lumbar area, in the back down here, and you can lock them up here in the cervical area. Those points are pretty easy to do. The lumbar being harder than the cervical because the muscles are bigger, which then takes a lot more force. But you can actually roll the muscles in the neck, and we'll show you how in just a second, that you actually trap them around the spine. And the easiest way to do that, Mark, if I can get you to come in, is based with a knifing. Now, everybody's seen what's called spear hand points. And a lot of styles think that you're just taking it driving it into somebody. The fact of the matter is, a lot of things you're not. Somebody, if you throws a punch, no happen. Block, and I roll that muscle right over there perfectly. Not only am I going to pull on that muscle, I'm going to send those muscles in the back if I push it right over the top of the spine. Snap it out, and he's going to be in trouble. In fact, I accidentally did that to one of my students. So one time, we're sparring 2 and 1, pop, and I snapped. And for about a week, he was walking around like this. Came back in and asked what was wrong, and he told me, and of course I fixed it. But the thing of the matter is, really easy to do. It's easier to do than you think it is. It doesn't take a horrendous amount of force. It just takes the right motion. It's kind of a rolling motion with the edge of your hand, and all of a sudden you're going to have these muscles locked up. you can cause damage. You can also cause damage, because as you notice, when I pushed on the sternocleidomastoid, it automatically causes his neck to snap. As his neck snaps, it loosens up the muscles there, which makes it, if I continue the motion, it makes it even easier to roll him over the top. So the pressure point strike in the associated area enhances your ability to do that. It doesn't detract, no, it enhances. So you're going to cause immediate pain from the pressure point strike. You're going to do the muscle lock, and he's going to have a neck that's going to be out and hurting for a long time and possibly do some major damage. Okay? Now, if I do the lumbar strike, you need to get in. And I like to use an eye of the phoenix. You got to basically hit it. You have to hit out in a 45-degree angle. So you can drive that muscle out and then kind of follow it around. So lock around the spine there. They're obviously a lot harder to do, but if you've got somebody who's sparring and you spin him around the back, an eye of the phoenix or a knuckle strike, you can easily come back in the right angle. See how that kind of hooks around? It just perfectly drops over that spine. And if he can't move his back and he's in pain, the fight is dramatically changed there. Dramatic. One or two. Either way, you can hook it back or push out. Again, both at 45-degree angles. And you now have a target in the back that's very valid. Very mean. Very... It'll change the fight, I guarantee you. Okay? We're going to work on that. And I want people just... Don't want anybody hitting. Especially on the tape. Do not hit. And really be careful on that because you can really put somebody in problems, okay? All right? By the way, I'm not even going to talk about how to reverse this. Yes, I can, but I'm not going to teach you. Because if you don't know how the technique to do it right, you can hurt somebody. So don't be thinking you can just reach out and pop somebody's back and put them back in. You can't. You can cause more damage trying to put it back in than you actually did when you started if you don't know what you're doing. So don't try. Don't try and do it yourself. If you have problems, go to a professional. Go to a doctor of osteopathy or chiropractor. Let them fix it. They can't, but do it soon. You wait off a week and you can be in trouble. Okay? One of the nasty things that I like to do, especially with a lumbar strike, Dan, can you come here a second?
Yep.
I'll turn you around with the camera. Is we said that you strike out at 45 degrees and then you try and bring it around. If you notice how your hand naturally turns, I deliberately hit and then twist my hand and then knuckle strike. Because as I twist, it not only pulls the muscle, it also automatically turns it in the right angle. So you hit and let it roll. So roll your knuckle. Hit with that knuckle fist or eye of phoenix, and then let it roll. And it'll automatically bring that around. So, just boom. Notice how your hand automatically makes that arc? Because that's exactly. Here we said you had to have an arc. Here you actually have to have an arc too. You're hitting out at 45 degrees, then you want that arc to go in, so it pushes it, that last quarter of an inch over the spine. So as it snaps back, it pulls it right against the spine. The spine's here, the muscle's here. I'm going to push it around and let it come back against the spine. When it's trapped on the other side of the spine, that's when you got your effect. And they're going to feel like they got a herniated disc. Because it's going to pull that spine of the vertebrae around, it's going to pull the vertebrae around and lock that whole thing up. 3 or 4 vertebrae on both sides. And they're just hurt. Boom. Just strike and let it roll. Just twist your arm. It'll automatically make you hook your arm and make it right angle. Makes it a lot less complicated. Okay? Okay. We're going to talk about level 5. If you thought level 4 was nasty, level 5 is even nastier. Which obviously means all the warnings that I had from level 4 apply and even worse. Now, I'm going to admit right now, when I did my book, I was kind of light on the information in the book on level 5, because level 5 is so blasted nasty. I'm going to go through the theory, then I'm going to tell you some nasty things that you can do about level 5, which automatically makes it real easy to do 5. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's almost easier to do a level 5 than it is a level 4. Again, you have to look at the fact that each of the vertebrae has got these spines on it. And each one of these ligaments, the spines are attached by ligaments. Now, the ligaments also are between the vertebrae. There's also these nerves coming out. The one thing I didn't tell you about a level 4 is that in the edges, front edges of the vertebrae, there's little groups of nerves called sympathetic ganglia. Now, sympathetic ganglia is where the nerves meet and they join from all the vertebrae, and then they go out to the different organs. So these ganglia are the control points that send out nerves to these organs. And if somehow you could damage these ganglia, you could dramatically affect the nerves that go to the organs. You can affect the nerves that go to the organs. You can affect the organs themselves. And a lot of chi theory is based on this concept. Well, like we said, there are muscles and blood vessels that flow in the same area. You got the ligaments, you got the nerves, you got the tendons and the muscles and the blood vessels. All this is crowded into this area. All right? If you can do something which would put pressure on this area, by trying to trap these muscles, you could actually put, if you put enough pressure, you can actually reach all the way out here and get the ganglia. But the truth of the matter is that it's really hard to reach all the way out and get these ganglia by itself. It takes, if you just trap a muscle over the spine here, you're really not going to reach out and get the ganglia. You might affect the nerves themselves, but you're not going to affect the ganglia out here. And a level 5 is not just the nerve here, it's actually the ganglia. So how do you do it? Well, you can actually try and trap enough muscles on doing that, and you can strike hard enough and maybe try and pull enough muscles up. Or you can do a real nasty trick. And the nasty trick that you could do is especially in the thoracic area. And you notice level 4 handles the cervical area and the lumbar area. Well, level 5 handles where the ribs are. Because as the ribs come around, Mark, if you just here, turn around, the ribs come around and they match up to these spines that come out here. And each rib comes up and they stop right here. But they're not the same piece of bone. There's actually a separation that's being held by ligaments. And it is possible to separate those. In fact, it's possible to take the head of that rib and shove it in front of that spine. Now look, think about what happens. If I take the vertebrae, sorry, not the vertebrae, but the rib, and push the head of the spine. See how this pushes forward? But it also takes all these muscles, all these ligaments, all these bones, our blood vessels, and pushes them forward. Suddenly you've got this mass moved over here. It is enough to reach the ganglia. That's the whole point. So what I'm saying is that you can dislocate, and that's what you're doing. You're dislocating the head of that rib enough forward, and when it's just like the muscles, when it's forward, it'll come slamming against the vertebrae and get locked there. When it gets locked there, it can affect the ganglia. And because it'll cause massive spasm of the muscles and cause massive bone, you can not only affect one ganglia, you can affect 2, 3, maybe 4. And these ganglia will go out to the organs, and depending on where you strike, you can affect the organs of the body. You can cause things like hypersensitivity to reactions like endorphin dumping. I should say endorphin, I should say catechol. You can affect the way the gut works. You can affect a lot of things, including the heart. Not saying you're going to stop, but you can cause a lot of arrhythmias. Now, there's a lot of medical articles done by some major United States universities, and I've delineated those articles in my book. Some well-known Western medicine researchers who have proven this. So what I'm saying is not conjecture. It's not based on Chinese theory at all. It's based on Western medicine, which proves what I just said is true. If you got my book, look up the references that I put in there. I put them there specifically so people could check that out. And you'll find that what I'm saying is exactly true. Okay? What you're doing is you're striking, so you're dislocating the head, the head of the rib. And again, the strike is pretty much the same. And you're striking in a 45-degree angle. So you're pushing the rib away. You're trying to separate the rib which comes in, separate it away, and let it push in and drop in it. So you're doing a 45-degree strike, and then kind of rotating, hit it forward. Now notice, I used the palm of my hand. And did not also rotate. Looks pretty much like the level 1 block, doesn't it? You can use an eye of the phoenix to get the muscle, or you can use a palm hand block. A level 1 block, except this time, is not designed to stop it. You're actually striking out. And you can actually dislocate the rib real easy with that strike. Boom. And all of a sudden, he's in massive trouble. He's having so much pain he can hardly breathe. His organ, whichever one you select, is in trouble. Not only that, you got a big problem. He's got a worse problem. You have to be careful. This could put you in court. Okay. I want you to work on the angle. I don't want anybody hitting him hard enough that you're going to cause any dislocation. Again, if something pops out, you need to seek professional medical help. They're the only people that can fix this stuff. All right? And you need to do it soon. Because the longer you last, the more the effects are going to accumulate. You're going to have trouble. Okay? Let's go up. The nice thing about level 5 strength is that everybody thinks when somebody's got their back to you that they're pretty safe. If you understand level 5 poisoning, you realize when they turn their back to you, they're not safe at all. They're very much in risk. So suddenly you've got targets in front, you've got targets behind, okay? All right? All right. All right. There's one area I want to talk about when it comes to poison hands, which is a very related area, but is not actually. I was taught it as part of the poison hands, but I don't know whether it's really part of the system or not. It's called G-strikes, J-I. Now, I covered it in my book, and I want to show people, because there's been some really confusion and some good questions about how to do a G-strike. A G-strike is a percussion strike. And a little history on that. Some people say that G-strikes and iron palm are the same thing. I'm really not going to get into that argument. They're pretty much the same, except that an iron palm, which I don't do, by the way, and I'm not an expert, I won't claim that I am, is basically using the center of the palm to strike a hard surface and cause massive damage from that strike, because they can deliver a lot of energy. That's not at all what a G-strike is. A G-strike is actually, you're slapping with the whole palm, rather than just the center, but you're also slapping with a percussion strike. You're actually keeping a section of air, and you're hitting, and then as you hit, you let your hand collapse. So you're getting a double strike, one from the air and one from your hand. Now, if you don't think that the air strike is important, you got to remember, in hospitals, they use an air, they just cup. They don't even let go of their hand. They just use the cupping action to vibrate and cause people to shake all the stuff loose in their lungs so they can cough it out. As actual medical therapy, they just have people who just go around calling respiratory phaphage. Phaphage actually just taps on somebody's chest, and it'll actually cause all the junk to be loosened up so they can cough it out. And they're just tapping really light. They're not even slapping somebody really hard. Now, if you add that air shock plus the strike, you suddenly have a very effective strike. Now, another difference between a G-strike and an iron palm is an iron palm, to the best of my knowledge, is designed against hard surfaces. A G-strike is designed for hollow surfaces. Because it's got a double shock or double strike, you can actually send two shock waves into the body, one from the air, one from your hand. Now, if you have a hollow organ, as those two shock waves go, both sides of that organ are going to start to vibrate. But if there's two strikes, they're not going to shake in the same symmetrical pattern. They're going to shake discordantly. And as that happens, the shaking is actually going to cause further damage to that organ. So you can actually cause damage to like the stomach or blood vessels or the lungs, because they're hollow organs, or the heart. Boom. And you can actually cause an eruption. In fact, one of the techniques of dim mag, one of about 20-some methods, is actually causing the heart valve's eruption. And I'm not going to show that, but I'm going to tell you about it. You can actually cause a rupture of a heart valve with a G-strike. Okay? You can cause the heart to shut down, too. I don't want to get into that. I am going to show you, again, I'm going to show you how a G-strike works. You basically cup your hand, and you let your cup strike the surface, and as it hits, you let it collapse. Not after, but simultaneously hitting and striking. Boom. All right? And you need to practice it against a hard surface. I suggest you just take a flat wall, and you learn to hit. After a while, you'll learn from the sound of your shake. If you're hitting, keeping your cup too long, it just won't. If you go too hard, it'll just slap. Now, I can't do it very well against the mirror, but if you get a good, flat, hard surface, you'll find that you can tell. You'll get the tone, and you'll know when you've got that double strike. But the nice thing about it, if you do it right, you do a palm, iron palm, your hand's going to get real red. You do a G-strike correctly, and it really should not be causing damage to your hand. You do it wrong, you'll cause damage from all the shock waves you're going to cause to the tendon. But that air cupping will actually cushion your hand. So done right, you're producing damage to your opponent, but you're also protecting your own hand. Because that air cushion will actually protect your hand. Okay? Now, how is a G-strike used? We said it's used for hollow organs. Sometimes you don't necessarily want to respond by getting close into your opponent. If he throws a strike at me, of course I could come in, or I could also strike again, block, step up, and strike right there. Now I had a very tight or very loose strike, and I caught him in the solar plex. By catching him in the solar plex, I caused the stomach and the esophagus to vibrate over the plexus there. And he could feel it real nice and deep. You can really cause somebody a real lot of problems. Same as like hitting them like that in the solar plex with a simple G-strike. Block, pop, and they're in trouble. big time trouble. They're going to have trouble breathing, they're going to have trouble moving, and their disorientation is going to be out. So now you've demonstrated that you didn't have to be in the inside, but yet I still got the core. Because there are not a lot of strikes that you can be able to hit at full extension and cause damage. The G strike is one. Again, block, boom. All right? All right. The camera says they want to turn you the other way. All right. Come across. Strike. All right. That was a very light strike, and you can see the reaction. But again, you hit it and let your hand collapse. All right. Boom. Not before, not after, but on contact, you let it strike. Right. So you get that double strike rate. And that's a G strike. It's very, very effective. All right? I want everybody to try and practice that. But don't hit your opponents. For those in the audience, or those in the camera, really be cool. Don't practice this against somebody else. You can actually cause rupture of hollow organs, and somebody can die. If you reach out and slap somebody's spleen, and it ruptures because of this, you're liable. I'm going to warn you, these strikes are dangerous. They seem like they're nothing because they're so easy to do. But to get it down right is hard. But when you get it, you really can cause damage. So it's a very effective weapon. Okay? Okay. We've covered quite a bit today in the poison hand system. Level 1, again, is to concentrate the force down into a very tight area. Level 2, of course, was the Golgi tendon apparatus stimulation. Level 3 was the nerve strikes. Level 4 was trapping the muscles around the spine. And level 5 was basically shoving the whole structures forward so you stimulate the ganglia. The G strikes we talked about, being the discordant resonant strikes. And you need to be careful with all these strikes. Practice this stuff when you know what you're talking about. Use common sense. Use caution. Don't go through and hit people. And just be very, very, very careful. Sometimes you get a non-responder who will not feel the pain until it's far too late. And even a light slap done wrong, you do it right, and all of a sudden you're going to have somebody who's really going to be in trouble. You just accidentally, I didn't intend to rupture his spleen. Well, that's too bad. Guy's in surgery if he lives. Be careful. Don't use this stuff and just think just because it's soft techniques that it doesn't mean that, just because you put a lot of force into something doesn't necessarily make it dangerous. Just because you don't have a lot of force doesn't make it not dangerous. These are Chinese techniques which are based on soft techniques, and they are very deadly. Very deadly. Okay, I hope you learned a lot. I hope you enjoyed it. I invite you to look at the references in the book. Look them up. Check them out. You're going to find even more information than I would, more in depth, and it's good. Not only is everything I said valid, and I can prove it, I want you to research it because it teaches you even more. So please, check out what I said. Thank you.